It was 10 p.m. when I heard the voice. I swear it came from behind the office door, but no one was there. I worked as a clerk for a small company in a village in Nigeria. The place wasn't big, and the people were decent, except for my boss. Mr. Ouma was the kind of man who never smiled. He was always angry, and there were whispers about him in the village, things people wouldn't say out loud. They said he had a darkness in him, something that didn't quite belong in a human being. But I didn't believe in all that. I was just trying to make a living. Until one evening, everything changed. It started on a regular Tuesday. Mr. Ouma called me into his office to sort through some files. He was alone, but when I walked in, the air felt wrong. The room was darker than usual, even with the lights on. I didn't think much of it at first, just a bad feeling maybe. But then he told me something strange. "I want you to stay late tonight," he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. "You'll be paid well for the extra hours. Just don't leave until I say so." I wanted to argue, to go home and rest, but something in his eyes stopped me. I didn't want to risk losing my job, so I agreed. He sat behind his desk, eyes fixed on the papers in front of him. The clock ticked loudly as I worked, the silence heavy. I noticed something odd, a strange smell in the air, like burning wood or something rotting, but when I looked around, I saw nothing. The hours dragged on, and I worked quietly. Around 9:30, I heard a soft scratching sound from the other side of the room. It was so quiet, I almost thought it was my imagination. I looked over at the door, but there was no one there. No wind, nothing. Then it came again. A faint whispering, just enough to make the hairs on my neck stand up. I stood up to check, but before I could even reach the door, Mr. Ouma stood up too. His eyes were wide, his face twisted in a way I had never seen. "Stay in the room," he ordered. "Don't leave. I'll be back soon." I didn't argue. I couldn't. But when he left, the door slammed shut behind him and the whispering grew louder. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. The voice sounded like people. Not human voices, but more like animal-like whispers. That's when I saw it. A shadow moved across the wall, stretching and shrinking. It wasn't a person. It was something else, something tall and hunched, with glowing eyes. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as the air grew colder. The whispers turned into growls, and the shadow moved closer to me. I felt its breath on my neck. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. My body was frozen, like it wasn't even mine anymore. The next thing I remember, I was outside, my hands shaking. Mr. Ouma was standing there, watching me with that same cold stare. "You're not to speak of this," he said in a low voice. "Or else." I nodded, too terrified to speak. The shadow was gone, but the feeling of it lingered. The next morning, I went to work like nothing happened, but something in me had changed. I wasn't the same person anymore. And every time I saw Mr. Ouma, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't entirely human. No one else ever saw what I saw, but I know what I felt. I know that whatever Mr. Ouma was hiding, it was evil. And now, every time I walk past that office, I hear the whispers again.